Welcome back to another edition of the Saturday to Sunday Football Podcast. I am Paul Perdichizzi, and thank you for joining me as always. Another college football season in the books, another NFL season in the books here at Saturday to Sunday. I'm going to break down everything that I saw from week 6 of the college football season and week 5 of the NFL season. So much to talk about as there is every single week. I can't believe we're 6 weeks into the college football season. I feel like not a lot has changed. I feel like so much has changed and nothing is as we thought prior to the season, except maybe who wide receiver one is, running back one, and tight end one. But besides that, I feel like it has been a very interesting year in terms of what our original evaluations were in the summer and where we're going in terms of the rest of the college football season and the pre-draft months of the NFL draft process with the Senior Bowl, the Shrine Bowl, the Combine, and all that comes with it. So let's kick it off like we do every single week with the NFL draft report for week 6 of the college football season. We'll get into that, and then we'll spin it over to the Sunday landscape and talk about the rookies and some Dynasty Fantasy Report in terms of some buy highs, buy lows, or sell highs, some guys whose stock has gone up and down. But let's go back to the college football week that we just concluded. Let's start at the quarterback position. And we talked about how Dante Moore of Oregon was rising up the ranks, and now he has put himself in the mix to be considered one of the top quarterbacks in this class. And by the time it's all said and done, I don't think it would be inconceivable for him to be the QB1 in this draft class if he was to declare. But a guy we haven't talked about, and now it's time to start bringing him up, is Ty Simpson out of Alabama. 6'2", 200 pounds. During this season, we're talking about 340 and 2, 276 and 2, 382 and 4, 226 and 3, 254 and 2. And it's not just about the statistics, because anyone who's been a longtime listener at Saturday Sunday knows I am not big into just statistics. If I was just about the analytics, my thought process on many prospects would be very different. But those statistics combined with how he's looked on film has now put him on the map as a guy who could be in the running to potentially be one of the top quarterbacks in the 2026 NFL draft if he was to declare, compared to the other names that have struggled this year, names that are probably going to go back for another college football season. But now Simpson has now put himself on the map to be considered in the mix. So the two biggest quarterback risers during this season have been Dante Moore and have been Ty Simpson. And that is, as we've seen guys, and I'll mention him in a second, as we've seen guys like Cade Klubnik go the other way, as we've seen a lot more doubts about Drew Allar, as we've seen Arch Manning struggle. There's been guys that have taken a step back from the pre-draft process in terms of what I thought in the summer. There's been guys that have elevated themselves, and then there's some guys that are still kind of held firm, like Mendoza. I still think could be the QB1 in this class. I liked him before the season started. I think Nussmeier's went backwards. I think Sellers is still intriguing, that if he comes out, he would still go early, but I think there's a better chance he goes back to school. I think Arch is going back to school. I think any thought that maybe Drew Allar was going to be a top 20 pick, first round pick, I think that's probably gone by the wayside. I don't think Garrett Nussmeier is much in the mix now to be a top 10 or top 15 pick. Could these guys still emerge and be intriguing day 2 options? Maybe. There's still enough time for things to kind of change the landscape a little bit, but it's a very different landscape in terms of the quarterback look, because before the year started, this looked like it had the potential to be an elite quarterback class. And that was when we thought Arch was going to take the step. Lenora Sellers was going to take the step. We thought Garrett Nussmeier was locked in as a first-round pick. Cade Klubnik was a guy who many people thought could be a top 10 pick. And it just has not played out like that. So talk about Ty Simpson. Stock up on Ty Simpson. He has now put himself in consideration to maybe be a round 1 quarterback prospect in the 2026 NFL draft. 2 guys who I just mentioned, actually 3 guys who I just mentioned, whose right now stock is going the other way. Cade Klubnik this past week, the stat line was gaudy, 22 of 24, 254, and 4 touchdowns. He has an uphill battle after how he looked early in the year, and there's still traits that are intriguing. He's got the athleticism. He's got enough arm talent. He can play off structure. But those first 5 weeks of the season have already dampened expectations with him. So he would need a strong finish to the year with high-end production and then a good pre-draft process to maybe put himself back in the the mix. But this was a good week for Cade Klubnik to at least show that he could put up a performance like he did this past week, 22 of 24, 254 yards and 4 touchdowns. Drew Aller, 19 of 26, 200 yards, 2 touchdowns, 78 yards rushing on the ground. We've been talking about this guy in college football, I feel like, for like years. And there's always been this really wide range of opinions on Drew Aller because he fits the prototype in terms of his size, in terms of his frame. He's not a statue in the pocket. He's not an elite athlete, but he's a good enough athlete to be able to pick up yards on the ground, to be a red zone weapon, to play a little bit off structure. But there's just so much inconsistency with his game. At times, he looks like this elite level prospect, and at other times, he looks like a UDFA. So I'm not sure where it's going to shake out, but my sense is the elite aspect of a prospect is no longer going to be there. I don't think people look at him and are going to put him in the top 10 mix. There could be some teams that are intrigued with the traits, and maybe he gets pushed into round 2 or round 3 on day 2. Could he have a strong finish to the year in pre-draft process and maybe he could be a late 1? I think it's possible, but I think it's just as equally possible is that he's a day 3 pick. So a lot of inconsistencies with him has not been cleaned up over the extra years he stayed in college football, and I think it's going to impact him when we're talking about his overall draft stock. Arch Manning, this past week, Texas loses again, this time to Florida, 16 of 29, 263 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. We've gotten to the point now where I don't know if I should even be talking about him on a regular basis on the NFL Draft Report. There was already a lot of doubt about whether or not he was even going to come out, even if he had a great statistical year, and he looked great. I talked about him because he was draft eligible, and people changed their minds, and if he lived up to the hype, and he has the physical traits, and he's got the size, and he's got the frame, and he's got the athleticism, and he's got the arm talent, and he's got the last name, and he's got the lineage. So I wanted to bring him up. I evaluated him in the limited samples he had, and I thought the projecting forward is what made me have him as my QB1 in the summer, based on the limited sample size. It has been a very, very challenging year for Arch Manning. You see some bits and glimpses and pieces of what I still think could make him a high-end prospect, but he's so far right now not at that level. And if there was already doubts about whether he came out this year, even if he had a great year, I don't see any scenario with Texas struggling, with Arch really having a very sluggish first half of the year here. I don't even see him as a possibility to come out. So I almost wonder if, like, unless he does something that really stands out, we'll keep checking in on him. But I don't even know if it's worth our discussion week in and week out anymore, because I just don't see a path where Arch Manning is going to be in this next cycle of quarterback prospects. Carson Beck, Miami beat Florida State this past week. Carson Beck, very surgical, 20 of 27, 241 yards and 4 touchdowns. We've talked about a lot of guys who've increased their stock this year. I think Carson Beck has at least put himself back in the mix to potentially be a day 2 prospect, especially with so many other quarterbacks struggling. It wasn't that long ago. If you rewind 14 months, let's say, many people went into last season thinking that Carson Beck was the number 1 quarterback prospect for the 2025 NFL draft, ahead of Cam Ward, ahead of the other quarterback prospects from last year, Jackson Dart, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, last year, a lot of decision-making issues, a lot of up and down, turnovers were a problem. But now Carson Beck is, playing with Miami, has gotten back to what I think a lot of people thought about him. Now, I don't think there's still concerns about his high-end physical traits. He's not a very mobile or athletic player. He's okay. He's functional in that regard. But you haven't seen him reemerge as a guy for round 1 just yet. And I don't know if that's because I think teams are looking a little bit closer, I think, at guys who should be considered round 1 quarterback prospects. I think they're looking for guys who can play off structure, be athletic enough to do things on the ground as well as with their arm, or have high-end physical traits that teams are just always going to be willing to gamble on and bet on. Carson Beck doesn't really check any of those boxes. He doesn't have high-end physical traits. They're fine. They're good. They're not very good. They're not great. They're not elite. He doesn't have the ability to play off structure and use his athleticism to be an integral part of his game. But we've seen a lot of improvement in terms of decision-making, in terms of ball placement, in terms of accuracy, in terms of going through progressions, the mental processing aspect of it. So I think he's put himself back in the mix to at least be in consideration to be a top 100 prospect. And if Miami continues to be very relevant, that's going to put him in the spotlight where he could have a couple big moments that really catapults his draft stock back into like even the top 30 or top 40 consideration. If we take this over to the running backs, two running backs, Justice Haynes and Jam Miller. This past week, Haynes had 117 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns for Michigan. Jam Miller, 136 yards rushing, and 1 touchdown for Alabama. Continue to kind of circle through a lot of the running backs for that 2026 draft class, because I do believe it's Jeremiah Love and then it's everybody else. And I'm not sure we're going to get another guy in the top 50. It's possible. I don't even know if we get another guy in the top 100. I think inevitably some teams will probably invest some mid to late third round picks on running backs, and some guys will emerge, maybe test really well in the pre-draft process. But it's a very different class of running backs that I could see a lot of teams just saying, I'm going to wait to the late third or most likely round 4, round 5. There's not a big difference in these guys. And you could see maybe Jeremiah Love being the only guy who we see in the top first 2 rounds of the NFL draft. And I do think he would be a first round pick, and then it would go from there. So I do think that's the kind of the scenario that we are kind of waiting in on these running backs. Could some guys emerge? Yeah. I just don't think they're going to, even if they emerge, I don't think they're going to emerge as potential round 2 guys. I think at best, if a guy really emerges, we're probably talking about round 3. If we take this to the wide receivers and tight ends, I mentioned in the first episode or 2 of the NFL Draft Stock Report in season, and that's Michael Trigg, the tight end out of Baylor. This past week, 8 catches, 155 yards. We're starting to see consistent, like top end production that we just are not used to seeing from the tight end position. So while I had my reservations about Trigg when I watched him in the summer, I thought he would struggle to be a full-time tight end. And I didn't know if he had the athleticism and the separation ability to be one of those high-end caliber athletes that teams are looking for if they're going to make an investment in the first couple of rounds in a pass-catching only tight end. But what we've seen from him this year is more than good enough separation ability. We've seen the athleticism. We've seen ball skills and body control with the ability to adjust. So I think his stock is squarely on the move up to potentially be one of the top 3 to 4 tight ends in this upcoming draft circle here for 2026. So Michael Trigg, definitely a name on the rise. In terms of the wide receivers, we've kind of made it very clear that we think Jordan Tyson is locked in to be number 1. I think after that, you're going to see so many different rankings from 2 to 5 in people's top 5 wide receiver ranks for the 2026 NFL draft. We talked about Mekhi Lemon on the last show, and I think he's going to squarely be in the mix to be potentially the number 2 wide receiver for many people who do rankings and put out their draft boards and their top 5s. But 3 other guys I'm going to mention right now are squarely going to be in the mix to be in the top 5 consideration, as high as number 2, maybe as low as number 6 or 7, depending on how people rank them. But I think all of these guys, I think the next 3 guys I mentioned will be in everybody's, I'll say, top 7 or top 8s, but some could be as high as 2, 3, 4, like that. Jeremy Bernard out of Alabama. We know Williams gets a lot of the attention, but he's not draft eligible. But Bernard has been a guy since the summer that I had roughly a late round 1 to mid round 2 grade. I think he's a top 50 player. I think the skill set that he offers this past week, 5 catches, 82 yards and a touchdown. So I think Bernard, in a relatively down wide receiver class, all things considered, I think is going to be in the mix as a late round 1, somewhere in that 20 to 32 range, or could slide somewhere to the middle of the second round. So I'll put somewhere like he could go as high as 20 to 22. He could fall into like that 50 range, somewhere in there. I think like 25 to 50 is where I think a guy like Bernard could end up when the dust settles. But he's a guy that teams are going to be looking for wide receivers. They're always looking for additional playmakers. Even if you have 1 or 2, you're still looking for another one. Like we saw last year, Tampa Bay didn't pass on Emeka Egbuka, even though they had Mike Evans, even though they brought back Chris Godwin, they continued to add to the well. So Bernard could be a guy that goes somewhere in the 20s all the way through the top 50. Another guy, Carnell Tate, the other Ohio State running wide receiver. We know Jeremiah Smith's not eligible for this year's draft circle, but Carnell Tate is another guy really good at a lot of things. Maybe he doesn't have an elite trait or an elite calling card, But listen, we saw Egbuka make the transition. These Ohio State wide receivers are very fundamentally sound. They know how to run their routes. They have a really good understanding of route concepts. Carnell Tate has that, and then he's got really good ball skills, the ability to adjust, high point the football, uses his body, knows how to stack defenders really good. He doesn't have like an elite at speed or anything like that. He might be a 4.6 guy, but I still think teams are going to be very intrigued with what Tate brings to the table. And a lot of these guys end up testing a little bit better than we expect them when they're really like honed in on prepping and getting ready for the combine. So Tate is a guy who I think could definitely be a round 1 guy. And if he's not round 1, I think he'd be gone by the middle of round 2. So just like I said for Bernard, I could see Tate going somewhere in the 20s of round 1. I could see him going in the 30s, 40s, or somewhere by the top 50. Most likely Carnell Tate would be off the board. And then Chris Bell, talked about him before the season started, that Dane Brugler was the only guy that was really hyping him up. And when I saw Dane have him ranked as high as he did, that's the only reason why I got eyes on him before the college football season started, because you didn't see him on a lot of top 10s, top 15s, not even on top 20s. But then when I watched him, I was like, wow, this guy fits the profile as a outside perimeter wide receiver, a true X wide receiver that has the size, the frame, the athleticism to win vertically down the field and to create separation. This past week, 12 catches, 170 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I think Bell has now put himself in the mix to be that guy who could be a top 50 pick. Like I was talking about before the year started, I think the combination of size, frame, speed, athleticism, production is going to put Bell in the mix. And I could even add Denzel Boston to this. I might have him a little bit later down, maybe not a top 50 guy, but maybe a late second to middle of the third round. This past week, 6 catches, 71 yards, and 1 touchdown. So I think the wide receiver ranks are starting to at least crystallize in terms of what players will be in the mix in the first 2 rounds. But I think the order in which they will be very drastically different on most people's rankings after Jordan Tyson being the clear number 1 guy. So that's kind of the structure that I kind of see for the wide receivers. Next up, let's transition this over to the Sunday game, and let's go to the NFL side of things and check in on these rookies. At the quarterback position, a couple guys now to talk about. We got Dylan Gabriel makes his first start for the Browns. They've now traded Joe Flacco to the Bengals. So now this quarterback depth chart is Dylan Gabriel and it's Shedeur Sanders. They're going to probably finish this year. Cleveland's going to evaluate them, see what these 2 youngsters have before they make a decision about the 2026 NFL draft, where they do have 2 picks. They have their own and they have Jacksonville's. But this past week, Gabriel was 19 of 33, 180 yards and 2 touchdowns. I think he held his own pretty well against that Brian Flores Minnesota defense. So I liked what I saw from Gabriel in the first start. I still have reservations, just like I did in the pre-draft months, about whether or not Gabriel's a long-term starter. I think he's a good spot starter, a decent caliber backup quarterback. That is what I would look at Dylan Gabriel as. Jackson Dart, obviously as good as week 1 went, a little bit back to reality. First 2 drives, he goes right down the field, scores 2 touchdowns for the Giants, but then things really kind of fell apart. Without Malik Nabers, it's going to be hard for the Giants to consistently move the football. 5 consecutive turnovers. Some of them were Darts doing, some of them were the wide receiver and running backs doing. He ended the day with 26 of 40, 202 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, but 55 yards rushing on the ground. Jackson Dart is going to be a fantasy factor regardless, because he is going to run and he's going to be highly productive as a runner. He's willing to take off. He's got enough athleticism and speed to make big plays, and then he's aggressive throwing the football. So you have an aggressiveness, willing to throw the football. Maybe not right now at the Giants. That might be a little bit challenging based on the receivers that they have, but he has that in his DNA to be an aggressive downfield thrower. We saw it in college, plus a big-time runner. That there's going to be a lot of fantasy goodness from Jackson Dart whenever he's playing. And then Cam Ward, great comeback for the Titans to get Cam Ward his first ever career victory at the NFL level. 265 yards. No, the stats were not gaudy in any way, shape, or form, but you see bits and pieces. And Dan Orlovsky is a guy who I respect his opinion a lot when it comes to the quarterback position. And he broke down Cam Ward this past week, and he said he's going to be a star in this league. He could be a top 8 quarterback when Tennessee kind of gets the supporting cast around him. There is still, I'm not ready to say that yet off of like one good half of football, but there's been enough moments where you see why Cam Ward was a top quarterback prospect. You see enough ability for him to play off structure. You see the arm talent. And there's a lot of things to like about Cam Ward. Titans they totally need to revamp the pass catching room. And then they need to continually fortify the offensive line. They took some strides towards doing that last year. I think they will continue to do that. But I think next offseason will really be about getting him weapons to help him out. I could see them investing decent money in a free agent wide receiver if one's available, and potentially round 1, looking at a guy like Jordan Tyson at the top of round 1. If we take this to the running backs and wide receivers, Quinshon Judkins continues to look like a stud, 110 yards and 2 touchdowns. Looks like a future, like basically he's going to fill in for Nick Chubb and potentially be that kind of guy for the Browns. Cam Scatterbo had 21 touches for the Giants, over 100 yards, big-time fumble, but you see he's going to be an integral part of that offense. And then the biggest name, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, 14 carries, 111 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Looks like he's now going to be the lead back for Washington. If people are still questioning that, go out and get Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt right now. In terms of the receivers, Emeka Egbuka continues to dominate. 7 catches, 163 yards, and 1 touchdown. He continues to show great chemistry with Baker Mayfield and putting up elite production. Isaiah Bond getting a lot of opportunities with the Browns. Only had 2 catches this past week, but you're seeing him now integrated and starting alongside Jerry Jeudy. I think stock up on Isaiah Bond. Jalen Knowles scored a touchdown for the Texans. Still not very involved in the offense, but it was nice to see him start to find the end zone and be more relevant for the Texans. Jack Bech is starting to take away opportunities from Dante Thornton in terms of playing time. I think he should. I know he doesn't bring that same tactical value that Dante Thornton Jr. does, but Jack Bech is a much better player. He can play inside. He's got inside-outside versatility. He's a good route runner, great physicality and toughness. I'm liking to see Jack Bech get an opportunity here. Mason Taylor, now very much involved with the Jets pass game this past week, 9 catches, 67 yards. That's 2 weeks in a row now. He's very involved in what the Jets are trying to do in the pass game. Gunnar Helm, nice to see a guy from Dave Perry, tight end, 4 catches, 34 yards. I think they're going to start to integrate him a little bit more into the offense as well. And then obviously Tyler Warren, 4 catches, 44 yards and a touchdown. I mean, at this point, I think if somebody said I want Tyler Warren over even Brock Bowers in Dynasty for the long haul, I don't think there should be a big pushback. I think he's right there now with Brock Bowers and Trey McBride. He's younger than McBride. He's only 1 year NFL, from college removed with Brock Bowers. He's a more complete tight end. I don't think he's ever going to lose snaps to another guy because they're worried about blocking ability. So, I mean, the sky is the limit for Tyler Warren. I think you will see him in the top 3 Dynasty tight end ranks for the next decade. So there it is, guys, the NFL Rookie Report for Week 5 of the NFL season. And then let's conclude tonight with a quick Dynasty Fantasy Report where we check in on some other NFL players in terms of their dynasty value, stock up, stock down, maybe a buy low opportunity. Let's start with a guy whose stock is down, but I would use it as a buy now window, and that is Jameson Williams of the Lions. A lot of people were very high on Jameson Williams before the year started. He was ranked probably in the top 20-ish in terms of dynasty wide receivers. People were expecting a breakout year from him. He has been very slow start. He had like 1 good week. They're not finding him looks for him. Everything is down the field shots, and if that's not there, he is putting up no production. If somebody bought him high in the summer, if somebody's been holding on expecting this to be his breakout year, they are probably very disappointed right now. I continue to come back to this upcoming draft class is going to be very weak in terms of rookies. Go out and make offers on Jameson Williams. offer a second round pick. Make sure they say no there. If you think you're a contender and it's a late first round pick, I would offer the late first round pick. If you could do a second and a young player with a little bit of upside, I would make that offer. I would try to get Jameson Williams right now. I think this is the lowest you will see his value. So while it is stocked down on Jameson Williams, overall, I think it is a buy low window for him right now. And I'd be aggressive in trying to get Jameson Williams on my roster right now. If we stay with some wide receivers, I will say stock up on all of these. And some of these are obvious, but I want to talk about them. One, Jackson Smith-Njigba. If he is not being appropriately valued as a top 5 to 7 dynasty wide receiver, then you should be aggressively going for it, because we have the Justin Jeffersons, and we have the CD Lambs, and we have Malik Neighbors, and we have the Puka Nakuas. But after that, Jackson Smith-Njigba is in the mix. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jackson Smith-Njigba, those are the guys that you're talking about with the other guys I mentioned that should be in your top 6, top 7 dynasty wide receiver rankings. And if he is not being valued at that level, then go out and aggressively try to get him on your team now, because I just think this is just the start of Jackson Smith-Njigba being a high-end caliber fantasy producer for years and years to come. Stock up on Jalen Waddle. I don't think we ever see Tyreek Hill play another down for the Dolphins again. Even after this injury, I don't think we see him back in that. So I think Jalen Waddle is going to establish himself during the rest of this year as the clear number 1 wide receiver, a role that I always thought he was suited for. But when they got Tyreek Hill, that pushed Jalen Waddle to the back burner. So if somebody's still looking at Jalen Waddle and think he's a low wide receiver 2, high wide receiver 3, I think he could be a top 15 wide receiver moving forward, top 15, 16. So I would go out and aggressively get Jalen Waddle. We saw this past week, 6 catches, 110 yards. Jordan Addison, people, listen, take the off the field stuff out of it for a second. On the football field, Jordan Addison is a really good player. And I think because he's behind Justin Jefferson, he's had some issues, the suspension to start the year. I don't know if he's being valued as high as he should be. So I look at a guy like Jordan Addison, I say, go buy him now if you can. And then 2 other names, 1 quarterback, 1 wide receiver. Sam Darnold continues to play really well for the Seahawks. 28 of 34, 341 yards and 4 touchdowns in 2 quarterback or super flex leagues. I think stock up on Sam Darnold. I think he's going to keep Jalen Milroe on that bench for a couple years at least. I think the Minnesota Vikings are probably having a lot of regret. I don't think there'll ever be another team in the history of the NFL when I'm alive that will kick a 14-win quarterback to the curb. I don't think people realize just how hard it is to win 14 games. Darnold was unbelievable until the final 2 games of the season. This looked like a guy that was in the strong consideration for MVP of the league, and they just thought he was easily replaceable with J.J. McCarthy. Hopefully McCarthy gets back from his injury and has a great season the rest of the way. But Darnold played at an elite level last year. It's going to take a lot for McCarthy to play at that level, and we're seeing Sam Darnold now do it in another place and be a productive player. And then Javonte Williams. I didn't think we were ever going to see Javonte Williams be a big fantasy asset again, but he looks like he looks like early career Javonte Williams before the injury, before coming back from that and not looking like the same player. And now he's going to have, I think, a monster statistical year if he stays healthy, put himself in position to get a decent, no running backs break the bank, but potentially get a decent contract from the Cowboys or another team to be somebody's starter, a 3-year, $24 million type deal if he has a really strong year this year. So I just traded for him in 1 league. I'm going to say stock up on Javonte Williams. I think some people are still a little leery because of the last couple of years. So if you can use that to your ability to try to get him now, I think that would be good. A good move also in Dynasty, because people are a little hesitant, but I've seen enough to think he's going to produce this year. And if he produces all year like this, I think you'll see him also get be in a situation next year where he's the lead of a backfield as well. So there it is, guys. NFL draft stock report for week 6, rookie report, and Dynasty Fantasy Report for week 5 of the NFL season. If you're enjoying this, please get over to the website, SS Football, fastest and easiest way to get there. Check out our premium content tab. See what we produce, see what we offer for $9.99. You get access to all of our premium notebooks. It is the best way to support the show. The earlier you can do it in the season, the better and more that it helps us. If you can't do that, please, wherever you listen to the show, rate, review, subscribe. If you're on YouTube, maybe just follow us on YouTube there as well, as we continue to try to at least put the podcast out there as well, as another way for people to listen to the episodes week in and week out. Looking forward to another upcoming week of college football and NFL. We'll be back next week to break it all down. So on behalf of my sound tech engineer, David Nakano, and myself. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward next time taking you from Saturday to Sunday.